Hi everyone and welcome along. Today's piece is a lovely landscape painting of the northern lights over a snowy landscape because I am really obsessed with finding a way to go on holiday and see the northern lights, so I thought the best way would be to paint it. So grab your paints and let's get started. Right, so before we paint we need to draw in a few things because I'm going to do this sort of landscape scene. So with my HB pencil I'm just going to sort of draw in a bit of a sort of mountainous landscape, and I'm also going to have a little cabin. So all I need is just to do some vertical lines and then a little triangle at the front. Triangle at the back. And then all of a sudden we've got ourselves a nice shape. And that's all we need really. So if I was not filming this, I'd now lightly rub out that pencil to make it really nice and faint. But for the sake of filming, we're going to keep it there. Now the other thing I'm going to do is I'm going to tape around the edges of my paper with some washi tape to keep it in place, because we're going to be using lots of water, but also it'll give us a really cool crisp edge afterwards when we peel it off. Okay, so just peel that, fold that down and just run your finger over the lot because you just want to make sure there's no little air bubbles. And it's important to use a low tack washi tape rather than a sort of masking tape that you'd use for industrial things or painting walls, because it's just a bit too sticky and it might take the paper off with you. So I've got two new brushes in here. It's really large brushes that are going to be great for washes. These are both Pro Art Connoisseur brushes, nice flat head or a pointed round that sort of acts a bit like a mop. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to carefully wet the paper up until this line here. So I like to have both of these brushes in play, get them wet beforehand, just so it's all about timing, you see, when you're wetting the brush and the paper. And when you're doing big washes, it's also important to have your colours ready. So we've got brushes ready, and now I'm just going to wake up the greeny yellow I have here, which is a ready-made mixture of sap green and cadmium yellow. I'm also actually going to get the yellow woken up because it might be useful. And then down here I've got hooker's green, which is a lovely vibrant green. And then I've got sap green as well. And actually cobalt turquoise might be really fantastic too to add in here. I've never seen the Northern Lights in the flesh, in the real life. I'm very jealous of anyone who has. I'd love to hear your stories of it if you have been, or if you've got recommendations for places to go for an amazing snowy holiday where you might just about see them if you're lucky. Because yeah, Ant and I really want a holiday. I need to stop going on about it, but okay. The other thing is, if these brushes seem a bit too big, you could use a sort of size 8 brush to at least paint in the nice neat line there, just so you're not having to go too close to it with a big wet brush. So yeah, let's do that. So lots of water there, and then there's lots of water there. These brushes were wet already, so I can just begin by spreading that water up the page, and now more water on this brush, and we can freely sweep across the page with lots of water. When I say lots of water, I think it's important to stress that what you don't want is too much water puddling on the page. So if you do find you've got when you sort of look and it catches the light, if you can see pools of water on your page, then you just get whatever brush you're using, blot it, really get rid of any moisture, and then use it to sort of scoop up water. I'm going to just put that to one side. Actually, I can no, I'll still use this actually. It's going to be useful. But I'm going to turn my kitchen roll round, so I've got a fresh bit there, nice dry bit. Okay, so our focus first is the sky and the northern lights. We in watercolour begin with our lightest colours first. So I'm going to pick up some of this green, sort of greeny yellow colour, and I am going to just begin by painting in some wobbly sort of flares of colour and just allowing them to blend into the page. There we go, that's fun. So the page is beautifully wet. It's allowing the colour to softly feather out and blend. I am not overworking it, that's very important. But we are also leaving these empty spaces here because of course we are going to have some night sky in there as well. So we're just focusing on the light of the northern lights. So I've now got Hooker's green, which is a really vibrant, fresh, lovely green. And I've also got some cobalt turquoise, and I'm just going to mix these two together to make a really zesty, light, fresh green colour. And what I'm going to do now is I'm going to run some of that colour sort of up the middle of that colour I already painted. Now if you get a little bit of colour into your bit where you don't want any, you could always use a clean wet brush to just brush it away. But notice how we're getting an amazing sort of feather out of colour from there. I'm going to keep moving, keep working. I love that turquoise actually. I'm just going to get a little bit more of it in there, and this time I'm going to get a bit more of the sap green, and I'm just sort of layering over the top each time. Okay, so I'm now going to leave that, and I'm going to wake up Payne's Grey with my big brush here, and this is going to be the most beautiful sky colour, and we're going to paint this in the gaps. So I'm trying to do it in as few brush strokes as possible, and I am allowing myself to overlap the northern lights, but I don't want to be sort of working too far to disturb them, but I do want to make sure I get really dark colours blending in. And of course, if your page is starting to dry, then you're not going to get the wonderful blends. But what I am going to do is I'm going to take a size 2 brush, and I am going to come down into here and just start to paint a nice crisp, neat edge onto that mountainside. And if your mountain did get a bit wet, then you can just sort of work down a bit further down and find where the dryness is. There we go. And this is all about allowing things to dry and being patient. So that's dried and given us an extremely atmospheric sky, which is wonderful. And now we're going to look down here, because of course the snow, the white of the snow, is going to reflect all sorts of colours. But we've also got this log cabin here. And when I was doing a few Christmas projects in December, one of the really popular ones was a sort of night before Christmas silhouetted sky, and the lovely glow from the houses beneath. So what I'm going to do with a clean wet brush is I'm just going to wet the area around the house. Down the hill mainly, and then I'm going to take some cadmium yellow and I'm just going to dab some in the house first, and then just a little bit down the hill, and maybe just a little bit on the snow there. And whilst that is drying, the other thing I'm going to do is, with a clean wet brush again, I'm actually going to draw some of the colour from the hill, from the sky onto the hill and down. Because we've got this, it's just fully dried now, which means if I sort of take a little bit of colour from the edge, it's only going to disturb it a little bit, but it's going to give me just a little bit of colour and a bit of shadow for that mountain side, which is really good because of course the colours are going to reflect that of the sky. You don't want to do it too much because you don't want to disturb the sky, but it just starts us off with a bit of an interesting contour of the snow. But I have got some of that Payne's grey here, and I'm going to get a little bit of burnt sienna in there just to make it a little bit more shadowy and a bit sort of less vibrant, a little bit greyer. And I want to now start to create this sort of mountainside with little bits of unpainted space, but also lots of shade. And then of course we've got the glow from the house. And that lovely sort of dry brush effect that we get on the brush on the snow is lovely. So I'm going to come up really quite shady from the bottom and just start to almost have hardly any colour on the brush. Just depicting a bit of the texture in the snow, and I'm going to add even more colour to the bottom there. Because we're using such small amounts of water, these little bits of texture are just starting to dry on the page really nicely. Okay, so one last little bit of waiting and then we can really bring this to life. Okay, so to begin with, I'm going to get a nice bit of concentrated shadow, but then I only want a little bit on my brush. I'll just take a bit off there, and I want to almost dry brush it onto the side of this mountain from the top. So I'm just taking it all off. There we go, taking it off the brush. Even removing anything I've got. Seems a bit of a strange technique to sort of put colour on the brush, take it off, try and minimise it down. And I'm really holding my brush quite angled, quite low to the page. What I want is I want to try and get a sense of the sort of roughness of the mountain. There we go. So yeah, using the side of the brush Oh, you can hear the scratching sound. It's very, very dry. If you start, maybe start right at the edge if you've got lots of paint on your brush. And then press it right down in to get some nice texture. So we'll do that on the mountains behind as well. So that's a bit too wet. So clean the brush off, dry it right off. Maybe try getting some strong colour on, blot it off. There we go. I think if you're nervous about doing this kind of technique onto your paper, have a bit of scrap paper to one side and give yourself a bit of a practice go before you put it onto your painting, just in case you're nervous of not sort of doing your painting justice. Another tip is if you use a brush that isn't too big, so this is a size 2 brush, it means it's only got so many bristles on it. It's not a sort of the kind of brush you can load up and it'll go for miles. Okay, lovely. Pleased with that. And then this one in the background here. Blot that right off. And then a little bit coming in from the side there. It's so cool, isn't it, when you think you know what watercolour can do, and then you just get something completely new and different. To best frame your piece, you do want to think about making sure your corners and edges are nicely darkened to draw the focus in to central pieces like this little hut here. So the hut itself, I need to mix up some more of this browny Payne's grey, but I think I'll sort of get it just the tiniest bit more brown. This wood cabin, but the bottom line is it's very concentrated. I might end up using a really small brush, and what I'm going to do, you could draw this in first if you wanted, is I'm going to mark in the windows and doors. And that glow will really shine through the contrast of those windows. Could have a little okay, and now I'm going to just paint in the cabin. So we've got our cabin painted in, and then what I'm going to do is I'm just going to use again the colour sort of running down in to just bed it into the land a little bit. because of course even where there's light glowing from it, there's also going to be quite a bit of shadow too. So I'm going to just sort of take some of that and then dry brush it away as we were doing before. So and of course this cabin, to make it look a little bit more realistic, we should add some little details, little minute details to it. So maybe a few little window panes. Maybe a sort of door frame. Some steps out, a little chimney. And then also, even in the dark of this sort of very dark cabin, there is even more darkness you can find. So we'll just pop in that extra dark, which will just help define the roof. And there might be a little sort of extra sort of shed or hut thing, sort of storage outside. And I'd quite like to sort of do a little fence, getting a bit bigger. Which could be joined by a fine line. And that sort of goes over the hill and disappears. There are lots of things you can do with these lovely snowy landscapes. And then of course we need to just ground each of these things. So what's quite nice is, although this began as a Northern Lights focused piece, we've got lots more out of it. With the texture, so wobbly table. The texture of dry brushing, the lovely little glow and contrast we get. So let's pull the tape off and see what we're left with. And there you go, one amazingly textured and a vibrant night of the Northern Lights. And I hope to be there very soon. Thanks so much for watching. I really hope you enjoyed that and were transported away by your paintbrush. I want to say a massive thank you to my patrons for their support, because that support enables us to keep creating videos like these that everyone can enjoy. And if you enjoyed that one, then hit the like button and comment below to let me know how you got on with it. And of course, if you never want to miss another video, just hit the subscribe button and that little notification bell. And we'll see you again next time. Bye!